Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for logging on to listen to my presentation about preserving progress and solutions for maintaining air quality alongside ongoing development west of Missoula. Thanks again, Tony, for inviting me to give this talk. Um, Tony's been an invaluable partner to the health department and does some incredible work at the University of Montana and with the academic health department. Um, as Tony mentioned, I have been an air quality specialist with Missoula Public Health for over 2 years. The 2 years have really flown by, but more specifically, I'm in the environmental health department, part of the air pollution control program. A little background for this talk. I'm currently taking classes towards a certificate in environmental health sciences, which is really what prompted this presentation today. I was part of Tony Ward's academic health department class this summer, which gave me an avenue and just a space to formulate some solutions to address air pollution in our growing community and county. This presentation is adapted and expanded from recommendations that I formulated during that class. All right, let's get started. So let's begin with some air quality history for Missoula. Missoula has some really interesting air quality, and everyone that I talk to that has lived here for a couple decades say that they really don't want to repeat the past air quality history because Missoula used to have a pretty bad reputation for air quality, and it had some of the worst air quality in the state. And it really developed this reputation between 1950 and 1990. So in the 1960s and early 1970s, wigwam burners, also called teepee burners, filled the valley with industrial wood waste smoke. And they were burning a lot of trade waste materials such as sawdust and other byproducts from milling processes. There are at least 11 of these wigwam burners in Missoula, and that picture on the top right corner is an example of one that was in Missoula. Another major source came into play in the 70s to 80s, and this is when people really began relying on wood to heat their homes. So wood smoke from residential wood stoves and fireplaces filled the valley, and it would become so dense that streetlights would actually turn on during the day. In addition to smoke from wigwam burners and residential wood combustion, there's also a lot of larger suspended particulate material, mainly from dust from gravel roads, um, because a lot of the roads in Missoula County weren't paved at the time. So the air pollution in Missoula wasn't just visible. They did a health study in the late 70s that compared the lung function of kids living in Missoula to kids living in Great Falls. And they found that kids in Missoula had decreased lung function in compared to those in Great Falls. And now that we've done a lot more research around air quality and the health effects, we know a lot more about the negative side effects of exposure to PM 2.5 and other air pollution sources. So although the mission to clean up Missoula's air took decades of effort and really unending vigilance that continues to this day, it was all prompted by the Clean Air Act of 1967, which authorized local governments to establish their own air pollution control programs. By 1969, the department developed their own program, which meant that the health department assumed responsibility for most sources of air pollution in Missoula County. And as soon as the federal standards for particulate matter and also carbon monoxide pollution were promulgated as part of the Federal Clean Air Act, the Missoula urban area exceeded those standards. The first recorded exceedances were in 1969 for particulate matter and 1977 for carbon monoxide. Now, just a quick note about monitoring air quality at this time. I'll be talking a lot about particulate matter that's 2.5 microns in size or less, or PM 2.5. But we haven't always monitored PM 2.5. Initially, for air quality and particulate matter, we measured total suspended particulate, which was referred to as TSP. And then it was narrowed down to PM 10, which is particulate matter that's 10 microns or less in size. And then we narrowed it down to PM 2.5, and there's still a lot of monitoring for PM 10, but there's a lot more monitoring for PM 2.5 now. So because of these exceedances, Missoula was designated a non-attainment area for particulate matter and for carbon monoxide, which prompted the development of a state implementation plan, or a SIP, which detailed actions that the health department was going to take to reduce air pollution. The SIP and the Missoula City County Air Pollution Control Program rules gave the department the authority to enforce emission standards that would reduce industrial, residential, outdoor burning, and transportation emissions. And we still have those rules today, and it's a reason why we have good air quality in Missoula. But overall, because of these regulations that specifically were targeting industry emissions at the time, by 1974, industry emissions were reduced by 90%. Despite the progress on industrial air pollution, wintertime particulate levels were still increasing because of an increase in wood stove use. And surveys in the late 70s confirmed that people were starting to heat their homes with wood stoves and were using a lot of wood for heat. So to further address this air pollution concern, the air program developed the Missoula Air Stagnation Zone, which there's a picture of it on the right side of the screen. And a lot of these rules, the Missoula Air Pollution Control Program rules, were tied to the Missoula Air Stagnation Zone. By 1983 and 1985, regulations on wood stoves were put in place so that only stoves with emission rates less than 4.1 grams per hour were allowed to be installed within the Missoula Air Stagnation Zone. Emission rates are just a way that we kind of classify the amount of PM 2.5 or particulate matter that's coming out of a specific wood stove. And we still use, a lot of our rules are based off of emission rates still now today. And so because of policy and rules and actions taken to reduce air pollution, Missoula last exceeded a particulate matter standard in 1989. But federal standards for air pollution continue to be reevaluated. And as research continues to reveal the negative health effects and the impacts of exposure to air pollution in particulate matter, we're learning more. And recently, the National Ambient Air Quality Standards were lowered. I'll detail a little more on that in a slide, but before we get to that, I'm sure a lot of you are already familiar with and aware of the health effects of exposure to air pollution. So this is going to be pretty brief, but doesn't mean it's not extremely important. PM 2.5 exposure is associated with several things, including respiratory diseases, cardiovascular diseases, and neurological disorders. So when PM 2.5 are inhaled, it bypasses a lot of our natural defenses, so it doesn't get stuck in our nose or our throat. It often travels deep into our lungs and can bypass into our bloodstream, which results in a whole slew of negative health effects. As you can imagine, little foreign particles going everywhere that your blood goes. So additional research has been done, and there's been a lot of research around wildfire smoke recently and PM 2.5. And that research has revealed that smoke exposure reduces lung function and capacity. It has a positive association with contracting influenza the following season, and is associated with immune dysregulation and decreased lung function in children. So as I had mentioned, the lowering of the federal standards for PM 2.5, which I'll refer to as the NAAQS, or the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, NAAQS. These health effects were taken into account for reevaluating these National Ambient Air Quality Standards. And in February of 2024, the federal standards for PM 2.5, the annual average, was lowered from 12 micrograms per meter cubed to 9 micrograms per meter cubed. And when the EPA made this decision, they stated that the lowering of the PM 2.5 NAAQS from 12 to 9 would result in up to 4,500 avoided premature deaths 800,000 avoided cases of asthma symptoms, and 290,000 avoided lost work days, which is a lot of avoided days and sickness. And so now in Missoula, we have 3 air quality monitors that are regulatory grade. There's one in Missoula at Boyd Park, which is right by the fairgrounds. And then there's one in Frenchtown by the elementary school, or the intermediary elementary school. And then there's one in Seeley Lake by the elementary school. So the monitors at Frenchtown in Missoula are subject to this annual PM 2.5 standard. And when we take a look at where we're standing on air quality, in Missoula, the PM 2.5 annual average has been well below the new standard of 9 for several years, despite Missoula being like the most populated area in the county. The PM 2.0 annual average in Missoula from 2022 to 2023 was 5.7 micrograms per meter cubed. And from 2021 to 2023, it was 6.5 micrograms per meter cubed. I know it says annual average, but for the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, it's really an average of 3 annual averages. So it's a 3-year running annual average. But so now to Frenchtown, which is less than 20 miles west of Missoula. The lower PM 2.5 standards to 9 puts Frenchtown at risk of non-attainment, which is when you're not meeting the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. So the Frenchtown monitor recorded an annual PM 2.5 average of 9.5 micrograms per meter cubed from 2022 to 2024. And then from 2021 to 2023, it was 10.5 micrograms per meter cubed. So although the Frenchtown PM 2.5 annual average exceeded the standards, exceptional event demonstrations were submitted to practically, it's not exactly nulling the data, but in a way, it's nulling data from days that are impacted by wildfire smoke from that annual average calculation. And so Frenchtown isn't in non-attainment, it is in attainment because they were able to disregard some days that were impacted by wildfire smoke. But keep in mind that that doesn't mean that the communities and the people in Missoula County aren't still exposed to that wildfire smoke. So to get a better picture of Missoula and Frenchtown, this graph shows the 1-year annual averages of PM 2.5. And on average, Frenchtown's annual average is about 2 micrograms per meter cubed higher than Missoula. And considering the amount of premature deaths and avoided asthma symptoms and avoided lost work days that the EPA stated would happen with lowering the NACs by 3 micrograms per meter cubed, this difference between Frenchtown and Missoula is a bit concerning. Now, Missoula County has seen a lot of growth in recent years and in several different areas of the county. It is the 3rd most populated county in the state with a population of approximately 122,000 people. And it has seen anywhere from an 8 to 10% increase in population every 10 years since 1990. And as people continue to move to Missoula County, areas outside of the central city of Missoula are becoming more populated and seen as desirable locations for increased development and growth. More specifically, I'm talking about the Y area to Frenchtown, which are 2 communities west of Missoula, which have already started to see an influx of people and development. The picture in the right corner on the screen is the Y area that has been identified to receive a lot of development. And there is an infrastructure needs assessment done for this Y area. And that assessment reported that the Y area is experiencing profound transformation, and it is now evolving into a crucial transportation hub, brimming with opportunities for significant industrial, residential, and commercial development. So, as an air quality specialist, when I hear increase in transportation, industry, residential properties, and commercial properties, I start to think about how this increase in population and development will impact air pollution, especially near an area that has already shown higher PM 2.5 levels than our most densely populated areas of Missoula. The boundary of the Missoula air stagnation zone, which are a lot of our air quality rules around paving and wood stoves are tied to, crosses over a small portion of the Y. So the boundary ends right at the Y, kind of right where 93 goes north. And since most of the Y in Frenchtown, which is further west than the Y, are outside of this zone, outside of our Missoula air stagnation zone, not as many of the more stringent air pollution control program rules apply. So as our population increases and the county changes, it's important that environmental health concerns are evaluated and pollution sources are examined so that we can really maintain and continue the progress that has already been made towards a clean environment and healthy air to breathe. So overall, we know that PM 2.5 levels in Frenchtown on average are higher than they are in Missoula for the last 15 years. And Frenchtown has been in attainment, but has had to have exceptional events such as wildfire smoke days removed in order to meet the 3-year annual average standard, such as the last 3 years, 2022 to 2024. So to address air pollution west of Missoula, there are several solutions that the air program can consider. One of them is to reevaluate the current Missoula solid fuel burning device installation rules. Another is to increase wood stove education and outreach. The third is to implement a wood stove changeout or heat pump installation program. And a fourth is to expand the Missoula air stagnation zone paving requirements. And a fifth is to evaluate the outdoor burning impact zone M. So I'll continue to go through each of these, but keep in mind that this isn't a completely exhaustive list. It's just a start, and it really provides a good ground for the air program to continue to reduce emissions and look at how the air program is functioning now and how it can improve in future years to account for growth in Missoula County. So in Montana, first, let's talk about evaluating the Missoula solid fuel burning device installation rules. In Montana, many homes rely on wood stoves and solid fuel burning devices, which I say solid fuel burning devices, but it's also wood stoves or pellet stoves to heat their homes. For most, this is out of necessity in areas that do not have other utility services that would provide heating, but also for reliability of heat during colder winter months. For others, it could be for ambiance reasons and the comfort a wood stove provides. And wood stoves and other solid fuel burning devices are a major contributor to particulate matter pollution, especially in Missoula County. But it's important to note that we can't just tell people that they cannot have wood stoves completely. It's important to keep cordwood heating as an option for homeowners, as other sources of heat may not be available or feasible in all areas of Montana, especially west of Missoula. So because the Missoula air stagnation zone ends right at the Y area, there's really this opportunity for a concentrated installation of wood stoves in the Y in Frenchtown without new regulations. Currently, the air rules around solid fuel burning devices and wood stove installations are that within the Missoula air stagnation zone, which is the green dashed section on the right side of the screen, it's a zoomed in version, and then the map in the middle is all of Missoula County that shows the different areas that the rules apply to. So within the air stagnation zone, only pellet stoves with emission rates less than 1 gram per hour can be installed. And when a property changes ownership or is sold, if there is a wood stove or pellet stove that doesn't meet the current regulations and rules, then it has to be removed. So outside of the air stagnation zone or in Frenchtown, only pellet stoves with EPA certified emission rates less than 4.5 grams per hour can be installed. Because of the boundaries of the Missoula air stagnation zone being right at the Y, the wood stoves that can be installed in part of the Y area in Frenchtown are those that have emission rates less than 4.5 grams per hour. And if I didn't make the distinction clear, outside of the air stagnation zone, people can install wood stoves, but inside the air stagnation zone, you can only install pellet stoves. Before I move on to this, quick note about the emission rates. So when these rules were updated, the emission rate of 4.5 grams per hour was chosen because that was the emission limit that the EPA was considering for catalytic wood stoves at the time. And in 2020, the EPA implemented a lower emission limit of 2.5 grams per hour for wood stoves. But at the time, Missoula did not adopt the stricter emission limit because it wasn't needed. And so it may be something that we need to consider now. One solution to reduce the residential wood stove smoke pollution west of Missoula is to adopt the stricter EPA limit, as well as expand the 1 gram per hour emission rate rule that's associated with the Missoula air stagnation zone to the Y in Frenchtown. And because I'm focusing on the Y in Frenchtown today, it doesn't mean that these rules wouldn't also be beneficial outside of these areas in other parts of the county that are starting to become more populated. Before the rules are considered and lowering emission rates are considered, it'd be really important to perform an air pollution source study and expand our monitoring network. So there's been several studies done on where the air pollution, what the source of the air pollution is in Missoula County, but a lot of it's been focused on PM10. We've done one on PM 2.5, but the last one was in 2010. And so to really understand what we're dealing with and the source of air pollution in Frenchtown, and it'd be good to have one updated in Missoula as well. It'd be good to start one of these studies just to understand what we're looking at. In addition, it would be important to, if the rules were being reconsidered and we were looking at expanding the 1 gram per hour emission rate rule associated with the Missoula air stagnation zone out to Frenchtown, it'd also be important to look at applying the wood stove removal rule associated with the Missoula air stagnation zone out to Frenchtown. So another option to address increased emissions or increased air pollution is to increase wood stove education and outreach. So proper maintenance and operation of wood or pellet stoves is really crucial for efficient stove use and smoke reduction. Using dry seasoned wood is one of the best ways to reduce both indoor and outdoor air pollution from a wood burning stove. The US EPA has a great program that has a bunch of resources, and it's called EPA BurnWise. And it really promotes best practices for wood stoves to reduce air pollution. There have also been several programs that other towns with elevated residential wood stove smoke have implemented that serve as great examples for the health department to consider, although they might not all be applicable to the Y and Frenchtown area. But these include establishing a wood moisture meter loan program, a registered wood seller program, or a volunteer-based wood bank. And now I have a couple examples of these, but for time's sake, I'm going to skip over those. So if you have any questions about those, I can answer them at the end of the presentation. So a couple actions that the health department can take to increase wood stove education outreach is to distribute the EPA burn-wise information, which we do already do, but we can continue to do that and try to expand the places that we distribute this information. Another really great option is establish a wood moisture loan program. And because I work in the air quality program, I am starting to establish a wood moisture loan program. I'm partnering with the Missoula Public Libraries, and I'm hoping to have a wood moisture meter that people can loan from all of the satellite offices of the library. And then other actions to take are to continue and to write new educational articles and publish those in local papers, and also attend community events to talk with residents about wood stove operation. We can also provide educational handouts throughout the community and include solid fuel burning device information to developers during development review periods. The AIR program sees a lot of new development and new houses that our agency can comment on. And it's really important to continue to comment about wood stoves and air pollution to make sure that people aren't, or to encourage people to use other forms of heat if available and possible. And the last one is to promote the installation of heat pumps for heat in new and existing homes. So the third suggestion and solution is to implement a wood stove changeout program or a heat pump installation program. Technology for solid fuel burning devices and wood stove or pellet stoves has really improved, and it's made stoves a lot more efficient to run with lower, and it's made stoves more efficient, and they have lower emission rates. So several towns have completed wood stove changeout programs where funding, typically from a grant, is used to replace older, less efficient, higher polluting stoves with newer stoves that are more efficient and have lower emission rates. The AIR program did run a successful wood stove changeout program in Seeley Lake in 2012 to 2014 to address wintertime air pollution problems, because Seeley Lake has a lot of users, a lot of wood stove users, and a lot of people in the town heat their homes with wood stoves. And it caused increased particulate matter levels in Seeley Lake in the town. And so this changeout program was successful in reducing the wood smoke pollution, but the air pollution problem was not completely fixed with these efforts. Another option is to encourage the installation of heat pumps or offer a heat pump changeout program. And heat pumps allow residents to keep their stove for backup heat, but have a better option for some of those milder days. As always, it's important to be monitoring for grant opportunities for either wood stove changeout program or heat pump program, but they're not always available. And so before monitoring for opportunities, a first next step would be to conduct a wood stove use survey to really get an idea of how many people in the Frenchtown Y area west of Missoula are using wood stoves for heat and how often they're used in the wintertime. Another potential option for heat pump installations is to stay up to date on home energy rebates to see if they apply to areas west of Missoula. So Montana DEQ was awarded over 70 million in 2025 for home energy rebate programs that could include funds for installation of heat pumps. And it could be a great option for people that want to use their wood stove less and have a more efficient, cleaner energy option to heat their home. And as with the first example I gave, expanding the wood stove removal rule associated with the Missoula air stagnation zone to Frenchtown would be very helpful to kind of get rid of the older, less efficient stoves in the area. The fourth option and suggestion is to expand the Missoula air stagnation zone paving requirements. When Missoula was non-attainment for PM10, a main pollution source was suspended dust from roads, and this contributed to 68% of the PM10 emissions in 2010 still. When a study was done in 1995 to 1996, it was found that dust from dirt roads contributed to 65% of the PM10 emissions. And so dust from dirt roads is a major contributor to PM10 air pollution. And there are still several unpaved roads, even in residential areas west of Missoula. And currently there are no requirements outside of the Missoula air stagnation zone unless it's required by different regulations like subdivision regulations. Currently, in the Missoula air stagnation zone, all new roads, parking areas, and driveways in this within the zone must be paved. There's a couple exceptions to that, but as roads are created, they are paved in the air stagnation zone. But this doesn't apply to Frenchtown or that section of the Y that lies outside of the air stagnation zone. So again, it'd be good to start with a survey of the unpaved roads west of Missoula to get a better idea of how impactful this change could be. And then we could look at expanding paving requirements out to Frenchtown. But it'd also be important to, consider other sources of air pollution, as I mentioned, to do a source apportionment study or to figure out the sources of air pollution in Frenchtown. And again, these are suggestions, and if tests show from that dust from gravel roads isn't a major contributor anymore, then expanding these paving rules may not be necessary, but it should definitely be evaluated. And lastly, the AIR program can continue to advocate for paving in new developments, even if the AIR rules don't apply to that specific location. Lastly, the AIR program can evaluate outdoor burning zone M. So similarly to the combustion of wood for residential heating use, outdoor burning can be a major source of particulate matter pollution, usually due to the likelihood of incomplete combustion of wood, depending on the burning practices and fuel characteristics. But it is a necessary tool for fuel reduction and creating defensible spaces on properties that may not have other options to remove fuel. So despite the high potential for particulate matter production from outdoor burning, the AIR program manages air pollution from outdoor burning and has the authority to issue burn permits. We can also open and close burning and set daily elevation or time restrictions. The AIR program applies outdoor burning closures and restrictions by airshed and burning zones or countywide. There are 3 air sheds, and 3 burning zones or impact zones in Missoula County. And most of Missoula County falls within Airshed 3A, which spans the entire western side of Frenchtown, the Y, and it also includes Lolo, Missoula, Clinton, and up to Potomac. So Impact Zone M is larger than the Missoula Air Stagnation Zone and reaches out to Frenchtown. And the air program can set elevation restrictions and time restrictions specific to each airshed or burning zone to manage air pollution. But it all depends on the weather conditions that indicate whether a day will be good for smoke dispersal and could have impacts on the surrounding community. So the air program could consider creating smaller zones for populated areas because conditions vary widely across Zone M. So although the air program can put restrictions on all of Zone M, it often is difficult to set it. It's not possible to set restrictions for just the Frenchtown area or just the Missoula area because of how big Impact Zone M is, and conditions can vary widely between Florence, Clinton, Frenchtown, and Missoula. And so it could be helpful to evaluate burning zone M to see if a smaller zone makes sense, or to determine if there's a better way to set restrictions. So in conclusion, air pollution is produced from a bunch of different sources in Western Montana, and the main contributors are residential wood combustion, prescribed burning, there's vehicle-related emissions, and then industry. The negative health effects from exposure to air pollution do pose serious threats to public health and safety, and it's crucial that efforts continue to reduce air pollution. The Missoula Air Pollution Control Program has implemented many successful measures to reduce air pollution and improve the area's air quality over time over the last 50 years. But as the county continues to grow and people continue to move here, air pollution control measures need to be addressed and looked at and evaluated. So the 5 solutions that I have formulated are to evaluate current Missoula solid fuel burning device installation rules, 2, to increase the wood stove education and outreach, and 3, to implement a wood stove changeout or heat installation program, 4, to expand the Missoula Air Stagnation Zone paving requirements, and 5, to evaluate outdoor burning impact zone M. I thank you guys so much for listening. I know that was fast and pretty rapid fire, but there's a lot of history around Missoula with air quality, and so I tried to get through a lot of it as well as I could. So thank you guys so much for listening, and I would love to answer any questions you have.
Thanks, Kerri. Yeah, Gil, did you have a question?
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Kerri. I joined a little bit late, so maybe you went over this and I missed it. But I was just wondering, um, is there any sort of epidemiological data on different sorts of respiratory illnesses or whatever within some of these areas you're looking at? I'm thinking about childhood asthma or stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't know if there's been a study conducted recently for these specific areas, but it definitely could be done, and that would be another good first step. We do have an epidemiologist at the health department, and the University of Montana is a great partner, and it could be a great study to look at and to see if we have increased asthma cases for during the winter time. So yeah, I don't know of any off the top of my head. Tony, if you know of any, and then let us know. But
Yeah, I am not aware of anything specific to Missoula looking at PM 2.5, but that doesn't mean that it hasn't been done.
Okay, thank you.
Here we got a question from Ethan in the chat. Kerri, nice presentation. What would the process look like for breaking Zone M up into smaller zones, and how feasible would that be?
yeah, it wouldn't necessarily be an easy process. So any changes to zones or the rules, need to go through not just like public comment period where people from the community can comment, but would also need to go in front of the Air Pollution Control Board and would need to be approved by the Montana Department of Environmental Quality and then by the EPA. And so, although I've thought about looking at impact zone M, and maybe applying other or breaking it into smaller sections. And I talked about that today. I think it would also, before that happens, we would consider like more restrictions more often and maybe setting a standard for restrictions. So like if conditions were if we had like a certain cutoff for mixing height for impact zone M, because that's our most densely populated area, then always having a elevation restriction for that. And we do have a little bit of that already because in our rules, it generally says that in order to do, I think it's specific to prescribed wildland burning, but in order to do prescribed wildland burning in impact zone M, you need to have excellent ventilation, but it doesn't have any specific like cutoff amounts.
We have another question in the chat from Damien. Under the current federal and state administrations, have we seen any decrease in the ability of local government to put air quality interventions into place?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So there was a change in the legislature around air pollution control programs and local programs. But so far, I have not seen any changes in our ability to implement interventions, but it does take a bit of time for interventions and programs to be started and studies to be conducted. And so I think time will tell a little bit more to that.
And I had a question, Kerri. So if you had the resources available, like what in your mind is the most impactful intervention to reduce PM 2.5 into the future?
Yeah, I think first off, it'd be great to do another study to see where our air pollution sources are coming from, or just where our air pollution is coming from, and to know exactly how much of what. But we and I suspect that a lot of the air pollution, at least in the wintertime, is still due to residential wood combustion. And so if that were the case, and the study showed that residential wood combustion is the leading source of air pollution in other areas other than Missoula, such as in Frenchtown, then I think a wood stove changeout program would be the most beneficial thing. I think replacing some of the older wood stoves with newer, more efficient stoves can really reduce the amount of air pollution. And better yet, I think supplying heat pumps is an even cleaner option. But it's, one of those things where a lot of people that have done the heat pump change outs, they like the heat pumps, but they still want their wood stove for a backup, which I think is great to have, but then we need to look at what their backup stove is. So it's very, I don't know, I could go on and on about it.
I have a question, Tony.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kerri. Kerri, I'm Jim Caringi, professor here at the school. Thanks for your presentation. I bet I know the answer given the political environment, but we're a new heat pump family. We didn't have a wood stove because we're on the west side of Missoula here. But is there any connection between the programs that put in the heat pumps to also solar options? Because that's really the bomb, right? If you can, get that going at the same time. Or is that just a broader, different thing? Because it's like more of a meta particulate problem with, coal-fired plants and things like that.
Yeah, I haven't heard a lot about the combo of installing heat pumps and solar panels, but I think that's a great, kind of double whammy option to reduce other air pollution sources that, and to have a cleaner energy is always a great step forward. But yeah, I haven't heard a lot about that combination, but I like it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions for Kerri? Okay. Well, great job, Kerri. Thank you for giving a seminar, and we learned a lot. So please
Great.
help me in thanking Kerri, everybody.
Yeah, thank you guys for listening, and reach out if you have any other questions.
All right. Thank you, Kerri.
Yeah, see ya.
Bye-bye.